Dear listeners and viewers, today we are going to study about evolution of international relation. Stay tuned with us. Subscribe and share. International relation is a science that has endured long period of time, and efforts at understanding the international system can be traced to the following four major points. When you study about international system, we need to study about the study of diplomatic history or the study of the current affairs after the First World War. And also, we can study about universal principles of the international system and the study of international institutions through law and organizations as mechanisms for solving global problems of conflict. There were efforts to develop the legal framework to tackle the problems of war and conflict as well as socio-economic deprivation in our world. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 influenced a paradigm shift to understanding forces and influences which shape and condition the behavior of states, like the determinants of foreign policies, techniques of the conduct of foreign relations, and the modes of resolving international conflicts. Later, the emergence of the realist school enhanced the development of scientific theories to explain international phenomena. Likely, the information and communication deepening with technological revolution, interdependence of people, the emergence of new nation-states has contributed significantly to the growing interest in the global system. So when we see specific points about the history or the evolution of today's international institution or relation, we can see the following specific points. In the year 1414, the Council of Constance assembled Ignore to shape the political and spiritual fortunes of Europe, the breakdown of the medieval system in European continent, the coming of the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Renaissance, the age of discoveries or exploration and expansion in trade and commerce characterized the influencing factor that led to the evolution of the state system in the today's international system. In line with this, the analysis of the international system therefore begins with the historical formation of the state system in the fragmented European empires. The fragmented empires into several was the basis for the formation of the today's international system. Especially the historic Peace Treaty of Westphalia of 1648 brought the princes and diplomats together to find lasting peaceful resolution to the war that fragmented Europe for over 30 years. What is the Westphalian Treaty? The Westphalian Treaty is a treaty signed between the European states and emerging new states. The incident that brought the Westphalian War or the Westphalian Treaty is described as follows. It started in a very small village called Bohemia, in today's Prague or Czech. At Prague, the Protestants and Catholics had confrontation one another. The historic Peace Treaty of Westphalia of 1648 is not one-day event. It was a lasting solution for the Europeans while they had war and conflict in between the Protestants and Catholics. The Bohemian village started it, later included the Danish. After the Danish war with the Holy Roman Empire, it started at Bohemia in today's Czech Republic. The Bohemian incident was the incident that brought the Protestants and the Catholics to had conflict one another. Later, the Bohemians, supported by Danish, had fought with the Roman Empire. it included the Swedish. Later, after the Swedish had fought, the French or the Catholic had fought indirectly with the Holy Roman Empire that was conducted in Europe for 30 years plus, one of the longest war in European continent. So in order to bring its lasting peace, the Roman Empire and the Protestants had decided to sit and talk. This is the beginning of the today's diplomatic relation, and mostly when we refer about international relation or system, we raise the issue of Westphalian Treaty. So what is the importance of Westphalia Treaty in the study of IR? Let's see it one by one. One of the advantages of the Westphalian Treaty or the Peace of Westphalia in international relation. The Peace of Westphalia was a series of peace treaties signed between May and October in 1648 in Osnabrück and Münster. These treaties brought the end to 30 years' war that took from 1618 to 1648 in the Holy Roman Empire and the 80 Years' War that took from 1568 to 1648 between Spain and the Dutch Republic. The pre-Westphalia is a period where there were different empires. There were several empires such as Persian, Roman, Arabs, Chinese, the Mongols, Aztec and Mayans. The relation between these political entities or the empires were controlled within the empire by the imperial or central authority. At this time, at the pre-Westphalian time, sovereignty didn't exist at the period. The significance of state sovereignty has become recognized. Significance of international efforts to solve a conflict using diplomatic methods has emerged. All sides participated, no dominant nature simply dictating policy. So what is Westphalia? After the pre-Westphalian period ended, the Westphalian Treaty has brought major points in the today's diplomatic history. Westphalia, or the idea of state and sovereignty, has become the mere acceptance of the today's international system. Westphalian system, a global based on the principle of international law, had the following. Westphalian system is a basis or a foundation for the today's global-based principle of international law. Each state has sovereignty over its territory and domestic affairs to the exclusion of external powers. Each state, no matter how large or small, as it is stipulated under the United Nations Charter, is equal in international law. So, Westphalian model implies purpose of legal equality and autonomy. Non-intervention in the affairs of other states has been stipulated, and it is taken as the beginning of the today's statehood. So, a state in international law, especially according to Montevideo Agreement, should comprise of the following: a defined territory, a permanent population, a government, and a capacity to enter international relation of other states. So, a state to be state needs the following: recognition from internal and external powers. The population should be permanent, and the territory should be defined, as well as the government needs to have monopoly of power. If a government has lack of monopoly of power, it could be stated or termed as fragile or weak state, and sometimes it is called failed state. So what is the difference between pre-Westphalia and Westphalian system? Westphalian system or system of states in international society, including sovereign state entities possessing the monopoly of force within their mutual recognized territories, has become one of the reasons to be defined as a state. The relation between states are conducted through formal diplomatic relation or ties between heads of states and government and international law, according to Westphalian system. What is the difference between the Westphalian and Westphalian system? System of states and international society, including sovereign states, entities possessing the monopoly of force within their mutual recognized territories, has become one of the acceptance or ways of accepting a state, according to Westphalian system. The Westphalian system has made difference on the relations between states and the way they conduct their formal diplomatic relation. The diplomatic relation has become formal between heads of state and government according to international law. It also has implied a separation of the domestic and international sphere. As well, it has brought states not to intervene in the domestic affairs of others. It differentiated between the model state system from the pre-Westphalian model. So the analysis of the international system therefore begins as follows, with historical formation of the state system, fragmented into sovereign entities. The historic Peace Treaty of Westphalia of 1648 brought the princes and diplomats together to find long-lasting peaceful solution to the war that had fragmented Europe for over 30 years. After the period of Westphalia, there were different incidents. The period from 1648 to 1713 marked another phase in the development of the interstates or state international system. It is characterized by competition and a struggle for supremacy among the European powers for colonial territories in the Western Hemisphere. Period from 1814 to 1815, as we know, it is after the period of Napoleon's invasion of Europe and Russia. Napoleon has invaded the continent of Europe by the united forces of European. Later, after Napoleon was captured, there were treaties in the European continent, and it was identified as the period of Britannica and the Congress of Vienna. The period from 1814 to 1815 was named the Principles of Compensation and Legitimacy. It was raised to restore the balance of power in the international system. This attempt was a temporary effort to lay the foundation of a political and international system. It later shaped the course of the European and, by extension, world affair. This was the era of the European state system, when the international system was regarded as Eurocentric in character. The Eurocentric era gave way to new dimensions of the relationship. 1. Allowed for the expansion of the state system. 2. By extension, made international relations more complex. Today, there are about 200 independent states comprising the international system as members of the United Nations organization. The increase in membership has been attributed to the disintegration of the colonial territories and the breakup of the former Soviet bloc. Under the subsisting condition, every state is equal before international law. Thus, every state strives to protect, promote, and defend its national interest at all costs, even to the point of going to war, if it is felt that the pursuit of the goal is in any way threatened. The contemporary international system is characterized by economic division between the rich north and the poor south, or global north and global south, that creates a dominance dependency syndrome that undermines equal cooperation and beneficial interaction. The history of the international system is replete with the hegemonic role of the European states. It is caught in the web of domestic wars in a bid to expand by acquiring more territories, and it was about also establishing dominance over one another. It is therefore a departure from cooperation and isolationism to the transformation of characteristic behavior of the system. Evolutionary trends in the international system show or testify to changes in the global system. The First World War of 1914 to 1919, the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Second World War from 1939 to 1945 brought with them some radical changes. Since the end of the World War II, the nation-state system has become internationalized as the global politics embraced all the nations of the world and caused a shift from Europe to America, from unicentric to multicentric system, and the redefinition of collective defense and balance of power. The end of the World War II saw the United States of America rising to the position of diplomatic leadership and coming to the limelight in the world affair. The United States provided the architectural design for the formation of the League of Nations, but it failed to partake in the building of the walls of peace. Also, it initiated and executed the establishment of the post-war international organization, which is the United Nations. As the post-war institutions were established, there arose the agitation for reforms by democratizing them to reflect the reality of contemporary world politics. With the various changes, the international system touched every aspect of the life of nation through economic, political, military, industrial, among others. The post-World War II politics was dominated by the hegemonic struggle between the former Soviet Union leading the Eastern Bloc and the United States leading the Western Bloc. The Cold War era was characterized by armed race and excessive nationalism. The event in Eastern Europe is the basis of analysis of the post-Cold War and international system. In 1985, economic and political reforms in the Soviet Union led to the introduction of glasnost and perestroika, that means openness and transparency in the Soviet Republic when Mikhail Gorbachev took power. This was in response to the call for the establishment of a new international economic system, the unification of Germany in 1990, dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, and the abandonment of one-party rule in Eastern and Western states that has changed the character of the international system. These changes laid the foundation on which the post-war World II order was built. It gives rise to the New World Order and ending the debate about unipolarity and multipolarity. The political and economic integration of Europe led to global liberalization and democratization, with the wind of democratic change that blew across the continent of Africa and Latin America, thereby influencing the transformation of the international system. The world today is structurally tending towards unipolarism because the United States has assigned to itself a new role in world politics as the chief security officer of the world, thereby marking the destruction of the balance of power principle. The change in the international system is likely to refresh multilateral diplomacy with a view to curbing the overt or hidden domination by one power through the expansion in the composition of the permanent members of the Security Council. The development, coupled with the desire of nations to acquire nuclear weapons, will result in polycentrism or the establishment of a polycentric international system. With the major changes, the structure of the international system has changed. First, there exists a global system in which international actors are co-inhabitants, with the existence of different international actors. Before 1950s, there were state actors to play in the international system. However, non-state actors have appeared in the international stage. Constructive engagement and interactions at bilateral and multilateral levels has occurred. and the resultant problems of conflict of interest presents the basic elements that have sustained interest in the international system. The configuration of power in the international system from 1945 to 1989 had become one of the basic reasons for the change in the structure of international system by forming a bipolar structure and dividing the world into two, into capitalist West and under the United States leadership and Communist East led by Soviet Union. The United States of America adopted such foreign policy strategies like isolationism and containment to check the spread of communism, the Monroe Doctrine, the Marshall Plan to strengthen economic relationship with the Allied partners in the Cold War era. From 1989, following the disintegration of the Soviet Union into 15 new independent republics, the ideologically inspired hostility between the East and the West came to the so-called an end. Since 1990, the only superpower remaining is the United States, leading to the promotion of the New World Order, an environment for the conduct of the foreign policy by all the states at the global level. With the structure of the international system, the analysis of the nature of the international system focused on the boundaries of the system, its structure as it relates to power, its unit and their interaction. The amorphous structure of the international system is the Earth covering the entire globe, inhabited by the human race, bordering on the examination of the degree of centralization and integration. Consequently, the international system is power structured and so centralized that it becomes difficult to integrate third world countries into it after the post-war and post-Cold War era. The simple explanation is that the international system is dominated by the industrialized nations, making developing countries to be dependent on them. So when we summarize today's presentation, the international system, which started at 1648, has been shaped starting from 1815 or the Congress of Vienna, later at 1919 at Conference of Versailles or the Paris Peace Treaty. After 1945, the world has seen the divided world view, and today it looks like the post-Cold War era has emerged. As you see, Ukraine and Russia are in war. China and US are in direct competition. I don't know where the world leads us. In the next presentation, we will have discussion on the issue of Cold War era. Thank you for listening. Subscribe and share. Thank you.